You reach a point of absolute desperation. You cry out for help, for comfort, for any sign someone is listening. And in return, absolute silence. Following the death of his wife, C.S. Lewis described this experience as going to a house in your hour of greatest need, having a door slammed in your face, and hearing the sound of double bolting from the inside. He wasn't immediately afraid that God didn't exist. He worried that he was finally seeing what God was actually like, a deceptive and indifferent commander who remains present during prosperity but vanishes during trouble. Research from the John Templeton Foundation suggests this is a widespread human experience. Their data shows up to 75% of people encounter these specific tensions and conflicts regarding the sacred at some point in their lives. This raises an existential question. Is this silence a necessary phase of life, or is it evidence that the universe is empty? For some thinkers, the silence is the answer. In 1993, philosopher J.L. Schellenberg formulated the argument from divine hiddenness, one of the sharpest logical cases against the existence of God. Schellenberg proposes a perfectly loving creator inherently wants a personal relationship with its creations. This diagram represents that guaranteed connection. However, the world contains non-resistant non-believers. These dots represent people open to a relationship who actively try but cannot find sufficient evidence to believe. The logic follows that a perfectly loving God would never allow someone to be stranded in this state. Since these non-believers exist, the logical conclusion is that such a God does not. It is the ultimate defense of the skeptic, famously summarized by Bertrand Russell. When asked what he would say if he faced God on Judgment Day, he replied, "Not enough evidence, God. Not enough evidence." From a purely logical standpoint, the silence of the universe acts as the evidence that we are completely alone. But the devout have a counter-argument. Historical mystics and theologians have long agreed that God hides, but they interpret the silence as a mechanism for change rather than a void. In the 16th century, the Spanish mystic St. John of the Cross named this experience the dark night of the soul. He characterized this as a phase of passive purification, a state of helplessness and confusion where the self experiences a complete withdrawal of natural, temporal, and spiritual goods. This period of perceived abandonment can be agonizingly long. Mother Teresa, for example, lived in this state for nearly 50 years, describing a profound emptiness and the sense that God was not there. For the mystic, the silence is a forge. It is the process of final unselfing, a total surrender to the hidden purposes of the divine. This idea is formalized in philosophy as the soul-making theodicy, advanced by thinkers like John Hick and Michael Murray. If God's existence were undeniably obvious, humans would be paralyzed by awe. Our freedom to make independent choices would be overwhelmed. Divine hiddenness restores the equilibrium. It creates the distance necessary to develop spiritual maturity and true morality. However, this theory struggles with demographics. If hiddenness is a universal test, we would expect belief to be evenly distributed. Instead, it varies dramatically across cultural and national boundaries. Vast parts of the world operate within non-theistic frameworks, such as Buddhist traditions, where a monotheistic creator is not the central focus. In Jain cosmology, or other ancient animistic traditions, the lack of theistic belief is natural and cultural, rather than a spiritual rejection. This leaves a paradox: a loving God who hides to preserve freedom, even when that hiddenness causes deep anguish and leads entire cultures away. We cannot verify the cosmic truth of why the universe is silent, but we can measure the human impact of that silence. Psychologists categorize these crises as measurable domains of spiritual struggle, each with distinct effects on human health and well-being. These struggles generally fall into three branches: supernatural tensions, intrapsychic conflicts within the self, and interpersonal strains. Within these branches, scientists identify specific tension points: anger at God, feeling punished or unloved, paralyzing doubt, and questions about whether life matters. Psychology identifies these periods as pivotal experiences. They act as literal crossroads where a person's life trajectory is decided. For many, this struggle results in brokenness, leading to chronic despair and a long-term decline in mental well-being. For others, the exact same tension leads to post-traumatic growth. These individuals report increased resilience and a more stable sense of purpose than they possessed before the struggle. Ultimately, whether the silence of the universe is the proof of an empty room or the test of a hidden creator, the way we wrestle with that silence determines the trajectory of our lives.